Once again, let me congratulate the now Prime Minister, the Honorable Timothy Harris of the Unity Party, on their historical win this week in St. Kitts and Nevis. But this win is a win for all believers of democracy. And there are some very important lessons that we can learn from what has happened in St. Kitts and Nevis. I want to start with our Prime Minister, who finally came out of his silence on the St. Kitts and Nevis issue and gave a press statement today. And in that press statement, he said, I quote, "Our region's treasured democratic traditions have been maintained in what was another peaceful transition of power." I say that in light or in the background of the fact that prior to the elections, the Labour Party at its convention months ago decided to invite the then Prime Minister Denzel Douglas to be their keynote speaker, despite the fact that that same Prime Minister was denying democracy in St. Kitts, and when he was not allowing a vote of confidence to proceed. I know our Prime Minister knows about the Westminster parliamentary system, and that tradition calls that if an opposition asks for a vote of confidence, that should supersede any other bill at the House. Instead, the opposition had to take the then government to court, and after winning in court, the government still refused to do it by going through the appeal process. Did our Prime Minister consent to that behavior by inviting the then Prime Minister to come? When we now look at other matters, the fact that the disputes of the boundaries leading up to the election, our Prime Minister made no comment, but many other leaders in this region condemned what was taking place and had asked the then Prime Minister Douglas to acquiesce and go back to the polls using the traditional boundaries. Instead, it had to go all the way to the Privy Council. The opposition pointed out, prior to the election, that the now infamous electoral supervisor, that his email address was Labour Dog. And these are the telltale signs that jeopardize democracy in our region. And again, our Prime Minister was silent. After the polls and after the attempt of the electoral supervisor to do everything to sabotage the elections, many other prime ministers and leaders throughout the region made their voices heard, asking Denzel Douglas to concede. But we didn't hear anything from our Prime Minister. So for our Prime Minister to come out and make these statements, and these statements are made in light of the Observer's editorial of today, in which it said that the events in St. Kitts brought their country, I quote, to the country's democracy close to disrepute and possibly civil conflict. And yet, our Prime Minister chose to ignore that, and at a time when he could have reinforced the values of democracy. I say to us in St. Lucia that we have a Prime Minister who says one thing but does something entirely different. If you are a true crusader of democracy, then it applies evenly for everyone. There are many more examples that we can use to show that our Prime Minister only talks about democracy, but I truly question whether in fact he values it.